Yeah, today I'm going to do a response to a video by Sarcastic Skeptic again, and this one is called What's Hiding in the Old Testament, The Shocking Truth. So I'm just going to play the video. I'm just going to play it for a few minutes and then I'll stop it and I'll comment on the video.
Alright, buckle the fuck up, because today we're unpacking the Old Testament, where God doesn't just dabble in brutality. He goes full psycho dictator, handing out death sentences like Oprah handing out cars. But instead of saying, you get a car, it's, you get slaughtered, you get raped, you get stoned to death for picking up sticks. This isn't divine justice. It's a cosmic shit show starring the original knobhead himself. Let's break it down and sprinkle in some modern-day comparisons to really hammer home just how fucking ridiculous this all is. The Battle of Jericho. God's kill everyone policy. We'll start with the Battle of Jericho, Joshua 6, where God tells Joshua, blow some trumpets, knock the walls down, and then kill every fucker inside. Men, women, babies, the elderly, even the animals. That's right, God, the all-loving creator of life says, leave no ballsack or bleeding goat behind. Imagine this today. A military general stands up and says, all right, team, we're going to invade this city, but here's the catch. Kill the toddlers, the grannies, and don't forget to burn down the local petting zoo. You'd call that guy a war criminal. But when God does it, apparently he's just cleansing the land. Cleansing? What is he? The divine Mr. Clean, wiping out entire populations like they're a stain on his fucking countertop. And the animals? What did they do? Was there a rogue cock planning a rebellion? Did a sheep say bah at the wrong time? God's like, fuck that sheep, kill it. He's the kind of prick who'd kick a puppy for looking at him funny. Numbers 31, kill the boys, keep the virgins. Oh, but the genocide doesn't stop there. Numbers 31 takes it up a notch when Moses orders the Israelites to kill all the Midianite men, boys, and non-virgin women. But the young girls? Keep those for yourselves, he says, winking like a fucking douchebag pimp. Imagine if this shit happened today. A general storms into a press conference. We've annihilated the enemy, but don't worry. We saved the virgins for, morale purposes. People would lose their fucking minds. But in the Bible? That's just another Tuesday. God here is basically running the world's first sex trafficking operation. Moses is out there like, kill the moms, keep the teenage girls, God's orders. And God? He's sitting on his heavenly throne, stroking his beard like, good job, lads. I'll send some locusts as a bonus.
So as you can see, this man, the Sarcastic Skeptic, obviously doesn't believe in God because of violence in the world and violence in the Bible. And obviously this makes him think that God isn't real, and what he perceives to be acts of violence by God is what is obviously making him believe that God, if he is real, isn't all loving. And obviously he calls him some pretty bad names in this, which obviously is free to do. If that's what you want to do, then obviously I believe in freedom of speech, so you know, you should be allowed to do that with anything and any other religion. Because if a religion can't take criticism, then realistically it's not a very good religion, is it? But I can at least come out with some decent theories to why God might have wanted to cleanse the land. And obviously, why did God flood the world to start with? It was because of angels crossbreeding with humans, animals crossbreeding with humans, which is evident throughout all mythology all over the world. You know, the Egyptian gods was depicted as, you know, humanoid, animal-faced things. You know, they're in Greek mythology, the stories of them in the Middle East and all over the world. So there is evidence that these could be true, that animals was being genetically altered back then and mixed with other animals to create these hybrid things that are so often talked about in ancient mythology. So, you know, maybe it could have been something to do with that, why God ordered such violence as it was with the flood. And in my opinion, most likely is something to do with that, but I really don't know. I don't know for definite. I don't know if it goes on to say. I mean, I don't think it does. It's what I've read of it. Like, I can't remember it actually giving reasons for this. It's just, you know, this is what God said, and you know, this puts a lot of people off. And it used to make me think the religion was ridiculous as well. But I'll let him carry on talking, and then I'll stop again in a second.
Virgin quotas, Moses? What are you, the divine Jeffrey Epstein? Slavery. God's favorite side hustle. Let's move on to slavery because, oh yeah, God loves himself some human ownership. In Leviticus 25:44-46, he straight up says, "Buy slaves from neighboring nations. They're your property, and you can pass them down to your kids like grandma's china." This isn't just morally bankrupt, it's fucking gross. Imagine your HR department rolling out a new policy. Good news, everyone. You can now buy your coworkers from accounts payable and beat them if they miss deadlines. Just don't kill them too fast. That's basically Exodus 21:20-21, where God says you can beat your slave, but if they survive a couple of days before dying, no harm, no foul. Jesus fucking Christ, what a pisshead policy. And where's Jesus in all this? Nowhere. When the New Testament rolls around, he doesn't fix it. Ephesians 6:5 is basically Jesus saying, "Hey slaves, just obey your masters and shut the fuck up. I'm too busy turning water into wine to deal with systemic injustice."
So now he's offended by Old Testament slavery laws and stuff and human rights. I mean, but you know, this book was written about 5,000 years ago. What do you actually think the world would be like at this time period? It wouldn't be anything like the year 2024, where people are, you know, used to the system and used to being controlled by the system economically and, you know, all sorts of ways. You know, we're all enslaved by the system. So realistically, we are a form of slave. With just some slaves are better paid than others, and these laws now might seem absolutely primitive to us in the year 2024, but this book is 5,000 years old, like I say. So what do you think these laws was going to say? These are some of the earliest laws ever given. So what do you think them going to say? This is a start. That's what it's about. It's about, this is a start to, I mean, they couldn't have enforced rules back then the way they can now anyway. So the world was a much more violent place, and people was much more violent than they are now, or there would have been people much more violent than what they are now, and there was tougher and stronger people as well. So I'll let him carry on a bit more.
Deuteronomy 22, marry your rapist bitch. Now for one of the Bible's most fucked up laws, Deuteronomy 22:28-30. If a man rapes a virgin, he has to pay her dad 50 shekels and marry her. Yep, because nothing says justice like forcing a woman to spend the rest of her life with the cockhead who assaulted her. Imagine this today. A judge says to a rape victim, "Good news, sweetheart. He's willing to pay your dad and put a ring on it. You're welcome." That's not justice. That's a fucking Lifetime movie no one wants to watch. God's basically saying, rape your way into holy matrimony, motherfuckers. Meanwhile, the poor girl is stuck with her rapist thinking, great, now I get to cook for this shithead every day for the rest of my life. God's body count. Satan is a pussy in comparison. Let's talk about God's favorite hobby, mass murder. Satan, the Bible's big bad, kills a grand total of 10 people. 10. That's less than your average Florida man on bath salts. God, on the other hand, he's wiping out entire civilizations like he's playing The Sims on destroy everything mode. The flood? God drowns every living thing except Noah's family. That's pregnant women, toddlers. Even the fucking fish probably got confused. And the plagues? God kills all the firstborn in Egypt because Pharaoh wouldn't let the Israelites go. But wait, God hardened Pharaoh's heart on purpose. That's like locking someone in a room, throwing a grenade in, and then yelling, "Why didn't you open the door, asshole?" Stick gathering and Baldy. Insults. The Petty Shithead Chronicles. God's not just into genocide. He's also the pettiest twat in existence. In Numbers 15:32-36, a man picks up sticks on the Sabbath, and God's like, "Stone that dickhead to death." Sticks, God? Really? What's next, smiting someone for folding laundry on a Sunday? And let's not forget 2 Kings 2:23-24, where some kids call Elijah Baldy. God's response? Release the fucking bears! 2 bears maul 42 kids because they made a hair joke. Imagine going bald and having a meltdown so epic that you call in a couple of grisly assassins. God's over here proving he's the original can't take a joke, asshole. Psalm 137, Baby Skull Smashers. Finally, let's talk about Psalm 137, 8-9, where the Israelites fantasize about smashing Babylonian babies against rocks. Yep, baby murder is an acceptable daydream. Imagine singing this as a hymn in church. Praise the Lord and dash those baby heads. What the actual fuck, God? You're supposed to be the good guy, not the poster child for infanticide. Slaughter in Jerusalem. Ezekiel 9:4-8. God's bloodlust hits home. In Ezekiel 9:4-8, God sends executioners to Jerusalem and says, kill everyone who doesn't have a mark on their forehead. Men, women, children, old people, it doesn't fucking matter. Imagine the angelic hit squad storming through the city, slicing throats while God lounges on his throne like a mob boss sipping wine. It's basically God playing The Purge, Jerusalem edition. And who gets spared? Only the people who weep about Jerusalem's sins. What sins, you ask? Doesn't fucking matter. God's too busy turning the streets into a bloodbath to clarify. This isn't divine justice, it's divine fuck around and find out. Jephthah's daughter. Whoops, gotta kill my kid. Judges 11. This one is straight up insane. Jephthah, an Israelite judge, makes a deal with God. If you help me win this battle, I'll sacrifice the first thing that comes out of my house to greet me. God, being the ultimate prick, holds him to it. Jephthah wins, comes home, and who's the first to greet him? His daughter. Yep, his fucking kid. And what does God do? Nothing. No. Hey, Jephthah, maybe don't kill your kid. I'm omnipotent. I don't need a blood sacrifice, you dickhead. Nope. God just sits back and watches as Jephthah slaughters his daughter to fulfill a vow that God never even needed in the first place. Imagine a dad today coming home from war, seeing his daughter and saying, well, honey, God says it's time for you to die. Grab a knife. Social services would haul his ass off so fast his sandals would spin. Rape, murder, and cannibalism. God's party favors. Isaiah 13, 9-16, Leviticus 26, 27-29. Isaiah 13 is a masterclass in divine psychopathy. God threatens the Babylonians with their infants being dashed to pieces and their wives raped. That's right, God, creator of love, justice, and sunsets, is out here promising rape as a divine punishment. Don't mess with me or I'll send armies to assault your wives and bash your babies' skulls. Yeah, great motivational speech, you cunt. But wait, there's more!
Yeah, he's getting really angry now. He's getting really angry about the violence that God has committed in the Old Testament and the primitiveness of the earliest laws. I mean, that's a strange thing to get angry about, isn't it? The fact that laws 5,000 years ago are nowhere near as in-depth and as advanced as ours. I mean, you know, this book is written from human perspective at the end of the day. I mean, especially the Old Testament. So a lot of the things that are going on here is what these people are reporting seeing, and they really do believe that God was responsible for this, and maybe God was responsible for this, but God had reasons, and that's why you trust in God, because we cannot even come close to comprehending or knowing what God knows. God knew what the outcome was going to be if he didn't do this, and maybe that was something to do with the reasons that he was doing this. I mean, you know, because there was obviously in them days, starting from the flood, there was definitely some sort of cleansing going on where God was trying to get rid of certain things. And like I said earlier, there's evidence all over the world about so-called gods and all kinds of things that have been passed down from generation to generation, and from from every single side, every single place in the world has got its own stories about these gods. And you know, you've got to start to ask, who was these gods? Because according to the Bible, and if you do believe in the Bible, then these gods was the fallen angels. You know, and the Nephilim, obviously the fallen angels and humans had babies, which led to the floods. And maybe God was cleansing more of this. I mean, I'm not saying this is even definitely the explanation, because I don't even know. But whatever the explanation was, God had his reasons, and God has got his reasons for everything. So, like I say, you just trust in God, and you just know that God is working for us and against evil. So we don't understand everything that was going on here, and even if we did, we wouldn't be able to comprehend the answers to it anyway, or anything about it. We wouldn't be able to comprehend the magnitude of it anyway. I mean, that is apparently what the Leviathan story is about when God starts talking about the Leviathan. You know, I've been listening to a lot of people who talk about this kind of thing, and I can't remember, I read it somewhere that sometimes the Leviathan, according to some like interpretations, represents a chaos of the universe. And obviously in the story of Job is one of God's favourites, but God allows Satan to inflict all sorts of punishments and pains and anguish on him. And obviously Job keeps praising God nevertheless, until one day, cursing the day he was born. And obviously this is when God goes on to describe a beast called the Leviathan. And this Leviathan beast is, according to some interpretations, some kind of force of nature that brings chaos and destruction that God is constantly fighting. And, you know, like I always say, we can't comprehend anything because we're not God. And it's not God that has created evil or brought evil into the world. It's God's creations that have done that. And the reasons God's creations have done that is because God given his creations free will. And obviously as a consequence of free will, evil could exist. But maybe you can't have life without having evil until it's properly eradicated, and this is all part of God's master plan to actually eradicate all evil. You know, so, you know, I always look at it like this, especially when you say things like all about God. I always look at it like this: if I'm wrong and God isn't real, then who gives a fuck? Nothing happens after this anyway. But if I'm right and God is real, and you're wrong and God isn't real, then you're fucked. But I'll let him carry on.
In Leviticus 26, God gets creative and says, if you disobey me, you'll eat your own children. Cannibalism? Really? God's up there saying, you thought famine was bad? Wait until you're deep frying your toddler's leg for dinner. That'll teach you to respect my laws. This isn't divine judgment, it's fucking sadism. Imagine a politician saying, vote for me or I'll starve you into eating your kids. They'd be thrown into an asylum. God gets worship for it. Onan, killed for pulling out. Genesis 38:10. Let's talk about Onan, the poor bastard who made the fatal mistake of pulling out. His brother dies and God tells Onan to impregnate his brother's widow. Onan, understandably not thrilled about this holy cockblock, pulls out during sex and spills his semen on the ground. God's response? Kill that wanker. Seriously, God? Murder over a little spilt sperm? Imagine modern sex ed classes ending with, and remember, kids, pull out and God will fucking kill you. Onan isn't even the bad guy here. God's just a micromanaging knobhead who can't handle a wasted load. Ooh. Golden Calf Massacre. Exodus 32:27-29. God's cow hate runs deep. In Exodus 32, Moses comes down from Mount Sinai to find the Israelites worshiping a golden calf. God, ever the reasonable douchebag, says, kill everyone who's into this cow bullshit. Moses rallies the Levites, who proceed to slaughter 3,000 of their fellow Israelites. This is God's version of, you broke the rules, so now it's time for some good old-fashioned ethnic cleansing. Imagine walking into a party, seeing people playing beer pong with a golden statue and deciding the only logical response is mass fucking murder. God doesn't do second chances, he just sends his people on a murder spree. Miscellaneous plagues and killings, God's favorite hobby. Oh, you thought we were done? Nope. The Old Testament is basically God's murder diary with pages upon pages of plagues, massacres, and divine temper tantrums. Here's a quick roundup. Number 16. God opens the ground and swallows Korah and his followers for daring to question Moses. Then, for good measure, he sends fire to incinerate 250 more people. Exodus 32. God sends a plague just to hammer home how much he hated that golden calf, because killing 3,000 people apparently wasn't enough. Yeah, Numbers 21. The Israelites complain about food, so God sends venomous snakes to bite them. Oh, you're hungry? How about a side of snake venom with that manna, you ungrateful bastards? Numbers 25. God kills 24,000 Israelites with a plague because they hooked up with Moabite women. Nothing says don't have sex like a divine STD in plague form. God's like that one asshole roommate who can't handle criticism and just destroys the whole apartment in a rage. Oh, you don't like my leadership? Boom! Plague! Who's complaining now, fuckface? Conclusion. God is the ultimate bastard. If the Bible is supposed to be your moral compass, then congrats, you're lost as fuck. Genocide, slavery, rape, baby murder, it's all in there, and God's signing off on it like the world's biggest scumbag. Next time someone says, God is love, just smile and say, yeah, if love means massacring kids, enslaving virgins, and murdering anyone who works weekends. Because honestly, if this is divine morality, Satan's looking more and more like the chill guy in the room. At least he's not out here smashing babies and hardening hearts for shits and giggles.
So as you can see by watching that, the sarcastic skeptics' reasons for not believing in God are mainly based on the fact that the world isn't perfect and that sometimes shit has happened. Obviously he calls this a genocide by God, but God is not human. God cannot commit genocide. God created the world. If an innocent baby dies, it goes straight back to God anyway. So to God, death would actually mean absolutely nothing. That would just be taking you out of this reality back into actual reality, you know. So that would mean absolutely nothing. And compared to God, like I say, we have got no comprehension of anything. So you can claim that this is all acts of evil and acts of, you know, showing a genocidal God, you know, evil, violent God. But you can argue that all day, obviously, and you know, like I say, this has put me off in the past. This is some of the reasoning why people don't believe the rest of the book, because of things like this going on. But at the same time, when you actually read the Bible, what does it say? It says that sin was brought into the world, you know, and obviously the fallen angels crossbred with humans and created the Nephilim, which is why God flooded the world. But then after that it says, you know, the Nephilim was on the earth in those days, and after that, meaning after the flood. So even after the flood, the Nephilim was still there. So, you know, we cannot comprehend what God's plan was then, but whatever God's plan was then, it's 100% definite that God was doing it for mankind, and God could see the consequence of not doing it, and could see the consequence of doing it, and obviously valued the consequence of doing it more. And you know, your tiny little brain is not going to wrap you know, it's not going to work out. It's not going to even be able to comprehend the situation that God is in, and you know, the choices that God has to make. So at the end of the day, your argument is mainly the world isn't perfect. I'm pissed off because of how imperfect the world is. 5,000 years ago we lived in a violent society, and that makes you really angry with God. I mean, obviously, you know, evil exists as well as good, and that is kind of the point. And maybe the only actual way that we can actually live, you know, is with evil, if everybody's got free will anyway, because, you know, free will is going to lead some people to evil. But obviously God values free will more than anything. So God chose free will because he thought that was the best thing to do, and free will is what we've got, which obviously leads, like I said earlier, it's not God that's not perfect, it's God's creations that are not perfect. And the reason they're not perfect is because God given them free will. God could have made them perfect, but literally, I mean, it tells you in the Bible, he chose not to make them perfect, and he chose to give them free will. So it's a choice that we make every day that leads to the actions that God, you know, goes through on. So at the end of the day, this is, to me, a pretty weak argument against why God doesn't exist, because this is just somebody who's really pissed off because in the old days the Bible was, well, stories that was written 5,000 years ago of violence. I mean, don't forget, like I keep saying, this is pretty much a human interpretation of what was going on. It doesn't necessarily mean that every single word of it is 100% truth. I'm not saying that I don't believe it, but I mean, we cannot comprehend what the world was like back then. So even if, you know, even if like these people was just totally different to us, these people had just come out, these people was wild. Basically, these were wild people, probably much more dangerous than us in the wrong person anyway, because, you know, lawless times, there was no laws, there wasn't all courts all over the world and everything, and like it is now, do you know what I mean? These people wasn't controlled by a system and police and stuff like that, and, you know, it's obviously absolute nonsense to think that because the way the world was 5,000 years ago means that God isn't real. Obviously that's just absolute nonsense to me. And obviously if God called for violence, then God had reasons for calling for violence, and I don't know or claim to understand what them reasons are. I've given a couple of maybe possibilities what they could be, but at the end of the day it was God's decision, and God's decision is perfect. So at the end of the day, what can you do? that was the right decision at that time. Obviously it wouldn't be the right decision now in 2024, I don't think, but at the end of the day, this is all stuff. Obviously if God is real, then we can't even comprehend what God is and how his mind works. We wouldn't even be able to do that with an advanced species of alien, let alone, you know, a totally, you know, eternal being that lives on outside of time and stuff, like, you know, because God is not just an old man sitting in the sky like he's depicted as. So at the end of the day, these arguments to me are pretty weak and pretty violent as well, to be honest. I mean pretty angry, I should say, not, you know, and the stories are violent. I mean, obviously, yeah, this was 5,000 years ago, this isn't 2024. It's not a woke society now where you can't even tell jokes about people, you know. They didn't live in that world then, do you know what I mean? They lived in the exact opposite, where there was no fucks given about who said what and who did what most of the time. Unless you was unlucky enough to get caught, you could pretty much do what the fuck you wanted in these days. A very different world to what we live in now. So I'm just going to leave it at that anyway, and thanks for watching.